Hello there YouTube, this is the Thought Hermit speaking. In this video I'm going to present you a way to take the names of SI units and make them easier to use in everyday conversation. This method I'm presenting you will allow users of the most widely used measurement system in the world to express its terms in a way that, on top of being more efficient, preserves the meaning conveyed in these compound terms. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the nuts and bolts of it. Growing up, I was taught that practically every country in the world, save Liberia, Myanmar, and my own country, the United States, used the so-called Système International to measure things from length to, say, magnetic flux density, whatever that may be. But then about 5 years ago, while working a summer camp job in Ontario, that belief I had had came to be quite shaken. I was chatting with another guy there, of course a local, and we were swimming in a relatively shallow part of the lake that this camp we worked at was situated on. When he mentioned how deep the water was though, instead of saying it in meters or centimeters as a bachelor's toting American like me might expect, he said the depth in feet. When I asked him why he used the latter units and not their alternative, he explained that in day-to-day life there, with the exception of temperature, people lean much more towards what they would call imperial units. Even more to my surprise, he said he didn't even know how deep it was in metric terms. For me, this confirmed a suspicion I had long held in the back of my mind regarding the possible faults of the metric system and moreover why it's not as universally accepted as it perhaps should be. In great part, it's simply a matter of linguistic efficiency. With terms like foot, inch, pound, ounce, cup, pint, and so on, there is only one syllable a given speaker uses in getting whatever quantitative information they need to across. Expressions such as kilogram, meter, liter, and any larger or smaller scale units derived from the latter two, on the other hand, consist of a greater number of syllables and thus expend more time and energy to get across the same kind of information, something I'd personally refer to as being syllabose. What these units do have working in their favor, though, is the fact that they're mostly abbreviated as single letters, called unit symbols. Hence, one way we could whittle down these units into single-syllable words is by referring to them by the name of the letter used for their symbols, especially if they're multisyllabic in their full forms. If the unit symbol is composed of more than one letter, like in mole for instance, whose symbol is MOL, we can contract such a unit down to just that symbol itself, and if the second letter of the symbol is not next to the first in the full form, then we can insert the letters in between them omitted in the symbol, making the CD for candela canned. However, since many of the letter names for such unit symbols start with a vowel, the way they could be shortened when after a magnitude prefix such as kilo or milli is by taking the sound of the letter used as the prefix symbol, in those instances K and M, and adding them on to the letter name to the unit symbol they're next to. Hence meter, kilometer, and millimeter would all get shortened down to M, Chem, and Mem. That said, there are certain conditions relating to given letters used as prefix and unit symbols that might impede this way of contracting metric terms. One of these is when a unit begins with a letter that serves as the unit symbol, and whose name starts with a consonant sound. A good case in point being gram, as the letter name for its unit symbol is G, with a consonantal soft G sound at the beginning. It's not as easy to just add on the sound of the first letter of the prefix to the letter name for this kind of a unit symbol. This gets us something that many people would not find readily pronounceable, and furthermore, since the C in centi would not be followed by an E when added on, as it would with the letter names M, S, or L, that creates some potential for that C to get confused with the K that you get from contracting the kilo prefix. In other words, the terms CGEE and KGEE could risk having the same pronunciation, which would make it difficult to tell them apart in spoken language, especially if the listener is less familiar with one or both of those terms. Thus, in these cases, it might be best to just leave the prefix component uncontracted and add the sound of the unit symbol onto that to make the contracted form. Hence, kilogram, milligram, and megagram become kilig, millig, and megig. We can also use this approach to contracting units for those whose designated symbol is more than one letter, especially if the first is a consonant. So for say kilomole and kilocandela, you can take this process and make the resulting contractions combinations of the whole prefix and the unit symbol, including any letters of the unit name omitted between letters of the symbol, and get kilomole and kilocand respectively. Another problem that arises is when we take into account the uppercase symbols used for the larger magnitude prefixes, such as the capital M and G that stand for mega and giga. In these cases, if you contract units containing such prefixes using the prefix symbol plus unit symbol letter name approach mentioned earlier, that could lead to confusion with units with a prefix with their lowercase counterparts as their prefix symbols. The clearest case in point of this would be with milli and mega. If we contract, say, millimeter and megameter through that method, both come out as mem, which is a case of ambiguity definitely worth avoiding. Hence, in the case of prefixes with uppercase letter symbols, it might work better to do something along the lines of the second approach. Take the full form of the prefix at hand and combine it with just the lowercase form of the unit symbol itself, just as we would when there is a one-letter unit symbol whose letter name starts with a consonant. So for example, megameter, gigameter, and terameter all get contracted down to megam, gigam, and teram, despite having a unit symbol with a letter name starting with a vowel. Also that we can avoid any potential ambiguity that could arise from the main approach. Lastly, in the case of prefixes with more than one letter as their symbol, it might best serve the goal of minimizing the length of the terms they're part of to simply take the prefix symbol and unit symbol together and use that as the contracted form. So for instance, decameter, theoretically in any case, obviously that's not used very much, would lo and behold have dam as its contracted form in this system. Also in a similar vein, if the prefix symbol is not a letter in the Latin alphabet, the only case in point presently being micro, whose symbol is the Greek letter mu, it would similarly work well to contract the unit to the letter name of the prefix combined with the letter sound of the unit symbol. So microliter, for example, would shorten to mol. Although we might need these approaches a bit less often, they would certainly help in regards to the main purposes of this method of contraction. Now, since we want to contract these units to the greatest degree possible while taking into account that one approach for contracting will work better for some units than for others, we will want to combine these approaches together into a system or process that has them ordered in the simplest way possible that also more or less gets us the desired results. With that considered, it becomes all the more apparent that this whole system of approaches at hand effectively gives us an entire flowchart of processes we can put into use if we want to make metric units more efficient to use in our speech. In this flowchart, we've got 7 boxes or nodes representing each condition that has to be taken into account, and 8 terminal points standing for the types of output we can expect from this process. The first condition we have at the top of the flowchart is what I'd call the mol condition, which we can think of as, does the unit symbol have 2 or more letters? If yes, then we can proceed to the candela condition, which in the form of a question might sound something like, are the letters in the unit symbol next to each other in the unit name? If that's a yes as well, we just leave the symbol as is with any prefix before it left in its full form. So millimole, for example, would get rendered into millimole, in this case just without that final letter E. If the answer to that is no, however, we take whatever letters there are in the full unit name that are in between the letters in the unit symbol and insert them between those 2 letters to get the contracted form. So for instance, say we have millicandela, where the base unit candela has the symbol of CD. We would take the AN, put that between the C and the D, and along with the prefix that we'd use in the full form, we'd get the resulting millicand. Now, if the mol condition is in the negative, that's to say if the unit symbol is only 1 letter, we can move on to the milligram condition, which we can phrase as the question, does the letter name of the unit symbol start with a consonant sound? If the answer to that is yes, we proceed to the gram condition. We can think of this as, is the unit without any prefixes? If the answer is yes, then you use the unit name as is, but if not, then you add the letter of the unit symbol itself onto the full form of the prefix. Hence, gram would just stay as is, while milligram would contract to millig. Going back to the milligram condition, though, if it's in the negative instead and the letter name of the unit symbol starts with a vowel or semivowel sound, then we proceed down to the microliter condition. In question form, this would more or less be as the prefix symbol in non-Latin letter. If the answer is yes, then we put the letter name of the prefix symbol together with the lowercase form of the unit symbol, giving us mol for microliter and so forth. On the other hand, if the prefix symbol is a letter in the Latin alphabet, as usually is the case, then we can move on down to the megameter condition. We can think of this as, is the prefix symbol capitalized? If that's the case, then we can take the full form of the prefix and combine that with the letter standing as the unit symbol, so for instance, as said earlier, megameter contracts to megam. If not, though, then we slide on down to the decameter condition, which in the form of a question is basically, is the prefix symbol made up of 2 or more characters? If the answer to that's a yes, then we put the prefix symbol together with the lowercase form of the unit symbol, giving us, as said earlier, dam for decameter and so on. If not and the prefix symbol is one letter, however, we make the contraction a combination of the prefix symbol itself added onto the letter name of the unit symbol. So millimeter, for example, as mentioned earlier, gets contracted into mem. Now perhaps some of you here might be a bit daunted by the fact that this isn't a perfectly simple single-step process and that there's several conditions to be taken into account in this whole method I've put forth here. To that I'd say that for one thing, having 7 or so of these things to deal with is by no means the same thing as, say, having endless myriads of them. Yet more importantly, if we're serious about making the measurement system of the scientific community and most of the world as widely used as possible, it should, needless to say, be a higher priority to have some sort of a way of making these measurements as efficient for the purposes of everyday speech as possible. Who knows, perhaps someday the contracted forms produced by this process will become so prevalent they eventually replace the original forms, and make the necessity of going through this arguably intimidating multi-step process obsolete. One can only hope. Anyways, folks, thanks for watching this video. If you'd like what I had to share with you today, feel free to share it with your friends, family, and anyone else. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, by all means leave that down in the comments. Also, if you'd like to see any more of my content, go on and hit the subscribe button to my channel, and if you want, donate to my Patreon linked in the description. Talk to you all next time.